Welcome back to another episode of Rectory Ramblings. I'm here this evening with Father Dennis Tame from Cameroon, trying to get him acquainted with the good country music of the United States. So it's Cameroon week on Rectory Ramblings. On Monday, we had Eric and Logan Horn here to talk about their missionary work in Cameroon in your diocese. And then so tonight want to hear directly from a Cameroonian about life there and some the faith there, and then also kind of the current political difficulties there. So, but first, I just want to let everybody know about how well you're in residence here at St. James now, but we've known each other for longer than that. So, what, 3 years ago?
4 years now. 2016.
2016, so four years ago, a little less than that, in my office at the Chancery, the Office for Clergy, a bishop from Cameroon walked into the office completely unannounced and came into my office, sat down, and told me that he was sending a young priest to study canon law at Catholic University of America, and he needed a place for him to live. And I didn't know what to do, but it sounded like a really good cause, and so we found you a place to live, first at St. Charles, and then after 1 year, you came here to St. James, and as Providence would have it, then I become pastor here at St. James, and so here we are. So, Father, if you could just tell a little bit about sort of your growing up in Cameroon and your family. It's kind of your grandfather was a catechist.
Yeah, he was a catechist, but something more than a catechist. Like, if I were to begin, I would say my grandfather is the one who brought the Catholic faith to my village, because prior to 1914, he wasn't a Catholic, he was a pagan, like any other person in the village, but he fought in the cause of the First World War, because Cameroon was a German colony. And so when the British and the French, who were ruling, colonizing Nigeria, and the French colonies on the east side of Cameroon, when they fought against the Germans in Cameroon, my father was recruited into the German army, and so he fought against the Germans, and he was imprisoned.
He fought with the Germans.
He fought with the Germans.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, because Cameroon was a German colony.
Right.
Yes. And so he was imprisoned in Fernando Po, which is today Equatorial Guinea. And while in prison, he was evangelized by Spanish missionaries. And there he became a Catholic while in prison. And then he came back to my village and built the first church, the first Catholic church. There were no priests. So all he knew was what he learned from the missionaries. That was all he knew.
So he not only converted while he was in the prisoner of war camp,
yes,
but he became an evangelist.
He became an evangelist, yes.
Boy, that's great.
Yeah, like actually brought the first apostle to my village, yes. The first Catholic in my village. So he built the first church there.
And so that's what, 1918, 1919?
Yeah, it's something like 1990.
And then how long before a priest arrives in your village?
Well, back then it was so difficult to have a priest come to the village, because between that period, between 1917 and 1923 in Cameroon is called the interregnum, because the Germans were sent out. And so the Germans also went out their missionaries, because the British and the French didn't want any priests who were Germans to remain in Cameroon.
Oh,
so the German missionaries went back to Germany. And so to have a missionary, you have to go to Nigeria, the neighboring country, to have English-speaking missionaries to come over, or the French fathers who were in French Cameroon, because the English-speaking Cameroon had no priests. And so they could stay like 6 months, at times a year, before they could see a priest. And the priest will never come to the village. Like, the priest will go to like the center, and then those in the villages, they will all walk to that particular area. It could take like 2 weeks for them to get there.
Right.
But that's how they managed to celebrate Mass maybe once a year.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so after the war, after World War One,
Yes.
France and England split Cameroon. They obviously they defeat the Germans in World War One, and they split Cameroon between them.
That was the League of Nations, because Cameroon, since Cameroon was the defeated colony of Germany. Part of the resolution of the League of Nations was that all the mandated territories that belong to Germany will be divided. So like Cameroon was divided between Britain and France. They became mandated territories of Britain and France.
but one country.
But no, not one country. They were now two separate colonies. And so English Cameroon or British Cameroon was governed as part of Nigeria. And then French Cameroon was governed as a colony on its own. So it was really kind of unique. So the British decided to govern their own part of Cameroon as part of Nigeria, while the French decided to govern their own colony, French Cameroon, as a new colony on its own. They didn't attach it to any other country.
And so when did it all become one nation, the nation of Cameroon?
Well, after the Second World War, there was this need for the countries to unite. The indigenous wanted to unite both the Southern Cameroon, as it was known, and French Cameroon. And so when French Cameroon got its independence in 1960, 1st of January 1960, British Southern Cameroon got her own independence. I think that was on the 1st of October 1961. And then there was a referendum in Southern Cameroon, the British Cameroons. And two questions were asked. Do you want to have independence by joining Nigeria, or do you want to have independence by joining French Cameroon? and many British Cameroonians voted to say, we want independence by joining French Cameroon as it was before. But a part of British Southern Cameroon voted to join Nigeria. So we lost part of our territory in Nigeria. That's actually the northern part, which is mostly Muslim. It's Islamic, yeah. So
okay,
yeah, that's how the two became one again.
So it was in the course of all of this, it's years before your village gets a church.
Yeah, it's years. Right now, the church in my village is still under construction. It hasn't been completed. The first church hasn't been completed. We had an old church. I think because when when my grandfather brought the faith, the church that was there wasn't really worthy of a church. It was broken down. We had something that looks like a church. I think right now is the time we are actually building our real first church, and it's still under construction.
So and it's about the 100-year anniversary of Christianity coming to your village.
Yeah, or something like that. Yeah, exactly. It should be 100 years now because 2013 we celebrated in our diocese and in Cameroon the centenary of the faith in Cameroon. So
when you're growing up in this village, was there a priest in residence there?
Not in my village, but in the neighboring village, because my village was like an outstation. There was a parish, and that parish had like 8 villages.
Yeah.
Yeah. As my village was one of those 8 villages. So we will see a priest only on Sundays.
Right.
We will see a priest only on Sundays. And some Sundays he won't come, and when he doesn't come, the local catechist will conduct the Sunday service.
Okay.
Yes.
So the catechist, for us, catechist is they're amazingly helpful in a parish. We pastors, depend on them for so much, but it's really restricted to just they teach. But in your grandfather was a catechist, but not just teaching, but he really sort of established the faith there, and it sounds like the catechists when you were growing up did the same thing.
Right now, the same thing for us catechists. They're more than just teachers. They are like community leaders.
Huh. Okay.
Yeah, because in most areas in English Cameroon, or when in Cameroon, we realize that the only educated person in the village might be the catechist. And so he's the one who really gathers your community. He's the one who is always there when the priest is not there, because there are many places that do not see a priest, maybe for a month or 6 months or a year. And so keeps the faith going. They're the catechists. They're the ones who organize everything. They're the ones who conduct the services. They're the ones who teach doctrine.
Sure.
They're the ones who teach doctrine, yeah.
Right.
So they really have a very, very important role, because our church will not be what it is today without catechists.
And when did you discern that you were to be a priest?
Well, that's really a very interesting story, because I think I was about 7 years old, and I was in class 4 in our own system of education, and I was an altar boy. And so one day the priest came to my village, and he brought his cope for benediction. And so I was an altar boy. I also served that day, so I went with the other altar boys into the sacristy, and I put on that cope. And I wasn't supposed to do that. Right. I wasn't supposed to do that, and so the other altar boys went and reported me to the priest that I put on the cope, and that priest was noted for actually giving us some knocks on the head. But that day he didn't actually give me a knock on the head, looked at me and smiled and said, "I think you'll be a priest." And it just kind of stuck with me, because I went to meet him. I was frightened, thinking that, oh my God, I'm going to receive some abuses today. But instead, I got a very, very encouraging remark on
That's
me. I think you become a priest, and he just stuck with me. That's how.
And was he Cameroonian priest or was he missionary?
He was a missionary. He was actually, I think, Dutch.
Dutch.
My
Okay.
father, Oswald Holzer, that was his name. Yes, he was a male hill missionary.
Is he still there?
No, he's back in, I think it's Italy right now.
Okay.
Yes, he went back home.
So you thought you were going to be in trouble, and in a sense you were. Now, right?
Now, at least now, I can already cope with knowing I'm a priest now. So it was a funny experience, but.
And the seminary in Cameroon, and so let's just take, so philosophy is the first part of seminary formation.
Yes.
How many seminarians studying philosophy now in Cameroon?
Right now, I cannot tell the exact number, but it should be more than 200. Because right now we have a philosophicum that is separated from the theologicum, because there are so many seminarians, and so they could not all fit in one seminary. I think my batch was the last batch that did theology, that saw both theology and philosophy in the former seminary. So now we have a philosophicum and a theologicum. So the philosophicum has more than 200 seminarians.
And the theologate has,
I think almost the same. So
boy, that's great.
yeah,
So very good numbers.
Dioceses who send their seminarians there.
Very good numbers.
Mm-hmm.
That's great. And but there is some suffering now for the church in Cameroon, some difficulties. Would you speak a little bit about the division, because that's why I wanted to hear about how was Cameroon formed as it is currently, because it's kind of a hybrid of a French colony and a British colony that once were a German colony. So it's this isn't going to end well. I think anybody who studied history knows this is ripe for disaster.
Yeah, the Cameroon of today, we can say, is kind of really an artificial construct, because at independence in 1961, when the two countries decided to come together and form one Cameroon, it was a decision, it was a mutual agreement between those two parties, the Southern Cameroons and the French Cameroons. And so they were at the conference, they decided these are the terms of this agreement. And I think the survival of Cameroon today was determined by the terms of those agreements. But it seems as if in the course of time, the terms of those agreements were never respected. And so what we have in Cameroon today is as a result of the failure, especially from the government, the French majority, that's the French dominated government, to respect the terms of those agreements. And so we realize British Southern Cameroons and French Cameroon, when they joined together, the British Southern Cameroons was a minority, because the English part of Cameroon just consists of 1/5 of Cameroon.
So the vast majority is French, is Francophone.
Francophone, yeah.
And so just 1/5 of it is Anglophone.
Anglophone, yeah. Just 1/5 is Anglophone. And so to make sure that there was a kind of equality, they decided to form a federal state, where each state is kind of autonomous. In that way, those in the English part of the country will not feel like they are marginalized. And they also decided, okay, if the president is from the French Cameroon, then the vice president should be from English Cameroon, and stuff of that nature, to kind of give it a kind of really balance. But then, in the course of time, 1965, the president at that time changed the country, changed the system in the country, and took Cameroon into a one-party state.
Okay, so no longer a federal system.
It was a federal system, but a one-party state. And then in 1972, he abolished the federal system and made Cameroon a united republic of Cameroon.
Okay.
To the anger of those in the English-speaking Cameroon, but they could not speak because it was a reign of terror. They could not really speak out, but everyone was truly disgruntled. And then in 1984, when the present president, who has been there for so long, decided to change the name of the country from a United Republic of Cameroon to the Republic of Cameroon. And that was the original name of the French Republic. And so those in English Cameroon felt like they were being annexed.
Okay, right.
Like they were being annexed.
So this arrangement of equality between the French, the Francophone and the Anglophone regions is gone.
It's gone. So basically, those in the English Cameroon say, well, if the name is now the same name that French Cameroon had before we became one, then it means we have simply been subsumed or consumed, assimilated into the French subsistence.
And because it was the agreement was that the French part would have Napoleonic code for they would the civil law, and then the British English speaking section would have the common law, and so they would have different legal systems,
Yes.
different languages, obviously.
Yeah, I was
And-
with a different legal system, different educational system. Was a kind of a bijural kind of legal system in Cameroon. That was
Uh-huh.
what was supposed to be. Yes, but then in the course of time, everything that was basically English was kind of taken to be second class, and
Okay.
so those from the southern Cameroons, that is the northwest and southwest regions of Cameroon as known today, felt like second class citizens in their own country. If you speak English in Cameroon, it's kind of you are treated like a second class citizen.
Right.
And so that inbuilt anger, coupled with so many other economic factors, really led many people in southern Cameroons to feel like they should go back and form their own country. They felt like, okay, this union with French Cameroon is not really going. So let us go back to 1961 and examine again the terms of
Go back to
coming
the
together.
founding, the
Yes.
Constitution, basically,
Constitution,
of your country.
Yes, and go back to
Yeah.
the terms of this agreement. And so at first it was just a minority that wanted secession to separate. Many wanted a return to the Federal Republic. I think things really came to a standstill. That was 2016, November 2016, when the lawyers in British Southern Cameroon, the English-speaking lawyers, were protesting, went on protest because they were angry that most of the documents in Cameroon were only done in French, and they wanted a translation of a text into English, and the government wasn't doing that. So they
Okay.
went on strike. And what was the reaction of the government? Sent soldiers and beat them up. The teachers too, in the English-speaking section, went on strike because they said, how can you send French-speaking teachers to go teach in English-speaking schools when they did not know English? So they went on strike. But the reaction of the government was to send soldiers and gendarmes, as the French call it, and they were beaten, the lawyers were beaten, teachers were beaten, and then people said, oh, this is getting out of hand. And even when the students in the university went on strike, they too were beaten and some were raped. That's when the whole thing really caught fire.
Wow.
Yes.
And so you have sort of the French region, which is the majority of the country, imposing its will on the smaller English-speaking region, and in violation of the original founding of the country,
Yes.
and then the federal system. Where's the church in all of this? I mean, is the church kind of caught in the middle? Does the church have a position?
When it comes to the role of the church in it, it's kind of a bit complicated as I see it, because when this whole thing started, I would say the church that is in the English-speaking Cameroon, because English-speaking Cameroon, the Catholic Church there is just one province.
Uh-huh.
They wrote a memorandum to the head of state outlining the history of Cameroon, outlining the genesis of this problem, and telling the head of state that there is a problem, there is an Anglophone problem in Cameroon, and that he should address it. And they outlined everything that was wrong with the way Cameroon was governed, and that later went to the presidency, and nothing was done about it. And a few months later, the bishops in the English-speaking Cameroon were taken to court.
Huh.
They were taken to court, and the reason why they were taken to court was they said they had closed their schools in violation of government policy that schools should be opened. And the bishop said, how do you expect us to open our schools when the lives of children are in danger?
Right.
So we are supposed to close our schools because the first thing is to protect the lives of these children and not to open our schools. So the church in English Cameroon was really vocal from a point of view. But then when it came to the National Episcopal Conference, you could realize that the language was not as strong as that from the English-speaking bishops, because the majority of bishops in the French-speaking area were kind of they didn't really see a problem with what was going on.
Right.
Yes. Maybe because,
Obviously, they didn't feel as strongly about it as the
Yes.
English-speaking
Yes.
bishops.
Yeah, because they were not really that affected. Yeah.
And so the bishops were brought. They were brought to court because they had closed the schools.
Yes.
They closed the schools because it was dangerous.
Yes, it was dangerous. Actually, it was dangerous.
And so they're brought to court, and now there's another Cameroonian priest in the area now who is here precisely because was he superintendent of Catholic schools
Yeah.
for his diocese,
Yes.
and what happened there? His life was in danger, right?
Yeah, that's the story. Yeah, that his life was in danger, and it's very common. I think he's not the only priest whose life was in danger.
You've had priests killed.
Yeah, there's a priest who was killed. Actually, yes, a seminarian who was killed.
A seminarian.
Well, yeah, the archbishop who was actually kidnapped, and then my bishop has been threatened so many times.
Your own bishop was threatened with
yeah.
to be kidnapped. The archbishop, he was kidnapped, and then what happened? How did he get released?
He was kidnapped by the terrorists, not by the government. So, like they said, they kidnapped him just because they wanted him to know what is going on. They wanted to talk to him. So, like, it's just like a reign of chaos. So, they released him voluntarily. So, at the end of the day, but he stayed there. He stayed in the camp, so he knows how it is like to do that.
Now, who are the terrorists?
When I say terror, I don't think that's the right word to use because
they're are they the separatists?
Yeah, the government calls them terrorists.
Okay, right.
But they would be terrorists, yeah. But they are like the ones fighting for the secession of British Southern Cameroon. They're the ones who want a new country in Cameroon.
So it really is. They really are trying to secede from the rest of Cameroon.
Yes, and from their own country.
Okay.
So they are armed. They have militias. They fight. In fact, they control most of the territory in the British Southern Cameroons, because the government soldiers cannot go everywhere. The government soldiers are basically in the towns,
and the church finds itself kind of caught between the government forces of French Cameroon,
yes,
and then the separatist forces of British.
That's very right, because the church has to navigate really through those really dangerous waters, because you have to communicate with both sides. You have to speak to the government, and you also have to talk to the separatists, because they are the ones on the ground. So the church is really caught up.
Right, and the gospel doesn't tell us which.
Yeah, right.
You know, there's not a specific Catholic teaching on which Cameroon you should want.
That's quite right.
And so the church's mission is just proclaim the gospel, and is getting caught in all of this.
Yeah, because the church's role right now is, as I begin to articulate, is we condemn injustice where it is, where there is injustice. We condemn violence whoever does it, whether it's the government or the separatists. We condemn it.
Right.
We condemn it. So, I think that's the position of the church right now, because they are the only voice, they're the voice of the voiceless right now, because the citizens are caught up as well.
And the children can't be educated.
The children can't be educated for the past 4 years. Schools have not really been going on for the past 4 years, which means you're almost losing a generation of children. Yeah. And when they stay home, what becomes of them?
Right.
Yeah.
And they can get cut. And when they stay home, they're not in school. They can get caught up in everything else, and everything that's going on.
Yes.
Wow. Wow. So you are here studying canon law, which seems kind of removed from all of this, but you'll go back there someday.
I'll go back there.
And you'll have to address all of these difficult issues. So we'll have to keep your country in our prayers, because I think you mentioned a couple weeks ago, you can't even go to your village now.
Yeah, it's really dangerous. I can't go to my village right now, because if I'm to go to my village right now, really, I have to really be extra careful, because you don't know who you can meet on the road. It might be
government, it might be separatists.
It might be government, it might be separatists. And then because of the situation, there's so much chaos, there are kidnappings going on, ransoms you have to pay, and then it's just really a reign of chaos right now.
Wow.
Yeah, it's really a reign of chaos right there right now.
Wow. So it really is, at this point, it's a full-fledged civil war.
To an extent, but at times it may feel like things are getting back to normal, because in the major towns in English-speaking Cameroon where the soldiers are present, there's a kind of normalcy. But that normalcy is actually a reign of terror, because people, when they see the soldiers coming, what do? They run and they hide, because it seems as if the soldiers are only out there to brutalize. It seems as if, because from the stories we hear, what people say, the encounters they have, it's not good. But in the villages, it will seem that they are the rebels who are in control, or the separatists who are in control. And so every now and then there are skirmishes between the soldiers and the rebels or the separatists. And so many people are dying. And so we can say, in a sense, there is a civil war going on. I will say that.
Yeah.
Yes, I will say that.
And what about the coronavirus in Cameroon? Has it been hit hard, or is it just not as much of an issue because you've got all these other things going on?
When it comes to the coronavirus in Cameroon, one cannot say for sure what is happening in Cameroon, because one doesn't know the exact statistics of what is going on. because the government gives us different statistics. People say a different thing on the field. It's so difficult because it's not as coordinated as you have it here.
Right.
But then what we do know is that people are dying of coronavirus. But the truth is also that I think that the pandemic hasn't hit Cameroon comparatively as in other places. And thanks be to God, because if it were to hit Cameroon, I think would have been catastrophic, because there is no respect for any of the guidelines or laid down rules with regard to this pandemic. Everyone does as he sees fit. There is no social distancing. Markets are open, bars are opened, people move around freely, and so it's just divine providence that we have not been hit hard.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. And not just Cameroon, but I mean, I think a lot of nations don't have that. I mean, just culturally, and you know, there's something to that, because social distancing is a little awkward. It's not natural. We're meant to be together, right?
That's quite right.
And we're not created to wear masks. But yeah, okay. Well, Cameroon has enough going on right now. So maybe say a little bit about what you are studying, because this is, I mean, you're getting a doctorate in canon law. You're going to go back. It's still a very young church, very, very young. When Eric and Logan were here, they said really it's only a little over 100 years old, right? That the church has been there.
Yeah.
Maybe 150, 200 years old.
Yeah, I think like the church came in Cameroon, and that was like 1887 or 1890.
Yeah,
I make a mistake.
Extraordinary.
Yeah, by the German Palatine fathers, they were the ones who brought the faith to Cameroon. So canon law, basically.
So I mean, how much of a canonical structure is there in the church in Cameroon right now? I mean, it needs to set deeper roots there, doesn't it?
Yeah, that actually, it needs to set deeper roots there, because in terms of like canonical structure of the church in Cameroon, you can say the outline is really there, as we have like the whole around.
Sure.
In the Catholic Church, there's a hierarchy that are
you have dioceses, you have a province,
bishops, and pastors and chanceries. But then at the same time, we realize that there is still really so much to be done, because despite the superficial structure, fundamentally we are still lacking so much in terms of organization, in terms of administration, in terms of understanding how the church should function. Yeah. In terms like when it comes, for example, issues of marriage, you might realize that there are few or no tribunals in Cameroon.
Sure.
Yeah, and even where you have tribunals, they might just have 2 or 3 personnel, and people have absolutely no idea what a tribunal is or what goes on there. People have no idea of that, and so
we would like to think that nobody would need a tribunal, right? That we would like to think that marriage is so healthy that they'll never need a marriage tribunal, right?
That will be so. I don't think that's the case.
Because you are studying the issue of marriage,
yes,
right? And so maybe say a little bit about what's the kind of the status of marriage in Cameroon, and especially in the church.
Yeah, I would say that's a very big pastoral problem in Cameroon. For me, I would think that's the greatest pastoral problem we have.
Is marriage and family.
Marriage and family. Yeah, at the superficial level, we may look at it and say, oh, Africans, they love family, they love children. That's quite true. That's really, very true. But what type of family, what type of marriage is it? So there's a fundamental difference between the Christian understanding, the Catholic understanding of marriage, and a typical African outlook on marriage. Because the Christian understanding of marriage sees marriage simply as a consent between 2 persons. Yeah, they are the ones who enter into this agreement, and this consent between 2 persons persists forever.
Right.
Yeah, and it doesn't admit of polygamy. It doesn't admit of the sharing of conjugal rights. But that is not the same thing with the African understanding of marriage. For the African, the child is so important and so central that the child can determine the outcome of a marriage. And so for the African, a marriage can be polygamous. A marriage can also admit of sharing of conjugal rights with another person who is not one's partner. And this often happens when there is no child involved, because the child is so central that if a marriage occurs without a child, one is free and legally allowed or culturally allowed to share conjugal rights with another person.
Huh.
And
so basically, if there's no child,
yes,
adultery is okay.
Adultery is okay if there is no child, actually.
Wow.
It's kind of culturally.
Culturally, right,
yes.
right.
Adultery is okay, polygamy is okay if there is no child, and even when there is
And
a
what's
child.
the church's
there is-
response to polygamy? Because I mean, I have to think that evangelically that this is a great challenge. If you evangelize a man and you lead him to the faith, and he says yes. I want to leave behind my religion, my false religion, and I want to embrace the true faith of the Catholic Church. And then you have to tell him, wonderful, but you can't have 5 wives. You can only have one, and it has to be the first one that you marry, right?
Yes.
So how does the church deal with that?
Right now, I think, well, like that's, as I said, that's really a big pastoral problem for us. And what the church does is the church simply teaches as the church teaches, that this is what it is.
Yes. It's just bringing the truth of marriage.
Yeah, bringing the truth of marriage as it is. And I think that is the reason why when you come to Africa or to Cameroon in particular, you realize that there are so very few people getting married in church precisely because of that. I think the least touch register in a parish is a marriage register. Is a marriage.
Okay, so just to so everybody sense, so every parish has you have your baptism register, your confirmation, first communion,
yes,
and just a list of everybody in the parish
yes,
who's been baptized, confirmed, reached their first communion, or married.
Yes.
And so you're saying like the thinnest one is the marriage one.
Yes, that's the one that has the most dust on it. Yes, because it's hardly opened, and that's why I say marriage is really a big pastoral problem, because all these things, it's so hard to tell someone, oh, leave these other 4 women behind and be married to this one. Even for the women, it becomes so difficult.
Well, because they
yes,
I mean, they have some sort of common life together, and
yes,
and dependence on one another.
yes.
So it is very odd. How do the other Christian denominations? How do they navigate that?
Well, I think it is only the Catholic Church that is really so firm on this.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, because I think, as far as I know, like the Presbyterian Church in Cameroon allows polygamy, is common. I think many other denominations, Christian denominations, they have no solid teaching on this. I think anything goes for them.
And so it's really the sort of the Catholic Church there, as elsewhere,
yes,
that's saying that this is what marriage is.
Yeah, this is what marriage is.
And it doesn't admit of adultery, even if you don't have a child, and it doesn't admit of polygamy, yeah.
Or sharing of conjugal rights and stuff like that.
And is there? I know this has happened in other African nations or the third world nations where there's great Western sort of influence and pressure. For example, with contraception or a lot of the what we call the LGBT agenda, if you will.
Yes.
Is that present in Cameroon as well?
It is present in Cameroon. You'll be surprised to know that in Cameroon we have Planned Parenthood. In Cameroon,
wow, okay.
Yeah, it exists in Cameroon. And as far as I know, like at times when you in Cameroon, like we consume most of the time the news you consume is like BBC. The type of agenda you hear from BBC when it comes to Africa, is basically like promoting LGBT issues. But the question the Africans ask is, we have so many problems, we have so many issues worrying us. That is not a paramount problem for us, but very often they try to make it the most important issue on the agenda.
Mm-hmm.
But then culturally, I think we are a very resistant people to this type of ideologies. I think African is a very stubborn person when it comes to these type of things. Mm-hmm. He won't easily give in to that. Even to Planned Parenthood, I think because of secularism, abortions are becoming something like more and more common. The use of contraceptives becoming more and more common. And so it is only the Catholic Church that actually speaks against this, because what I realize is the other churches they don't have
no, they don't. Well, they don't have the doctrine to withstand that. Your former bishop was pretty outspoken, I think.
Yeah.
Right. He's now the archbishop. Is that right?
He is the archbishop now.
And he was at the synod, right? Was it the synod on family?
Yeah, I was at on family. Yeah.
And he was pretty outspoken, and I remember reading some of the things he said. Like, oh, that guy came to my office.
yeah, he's like in the province. He's really one of those bishops who's so dynamic and really outspoken and also well respected from that point of view. And he's a great teacher. So
that's wonderful.
Yes.
Great. Well, Father, thank you so much, and we'll keep Cameroon in our prayers. And I should also say that Father Dennis is he's a wonderful teacher, great priest to have living in the rectory. He's very bright. But on the soccer field, he's particularly dangerous, and so here he's Father Dennis. On the soccer field, he's Dennis the Menace, because he's.
I was better when I was younger.
Work we all, Father. Well, thank you for joining us for another episode of Rectory Ramblings. We'll be back Monday night at 8 p.m. God bless.